to my channel. Today I'm going to do my March wrap up, and let me tell you, I haven't had a reading month like this in ages, probably in forever. I haven't read this many books in a month in so long, and also like so many good books. I've enjoyed everyone. One of these books that I'm going to talk about is probably my favorite book of all times now. So a good reading month, let me tell you, and I'm excited to share it with you. So if you've been watching my vlogs, you probably already have seen all of these books because I have vlogged a lot this month and I've talked about all of these books basically, but I thought I would do a wrap up anyway because I don't think I'm gonna do wrap ups every month, but if I'm having a really good reading month and I really feel like I want to talk about them, I'm gonna do one. And this month is one of those months. So I have read 8 books in total. We have 2 mystery books, 4 YA contemporary, 1 YA fantasy, and 1 that I'm a little bit hesitant about, but I categorized it in sci-fi / fantasy, but I'm not really sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I wrote down. Total pages is 2,774, and the longest book was 501 pages, and the shortest book was 236 pages. So I'm gonna do them in order. So the first one I read I'm gonna talk about first, and to the last one. So let's talk about the first book that I read this month. The first book is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. This is a book about a girl named Marion who lives in California with her grandpa, I believe. I feel like it's been such a long time, but I think it's with her grandpa. And when he dies, she doesn't really know what to do. So Marion takes her bag, moves to New York to go to college there, and leaves everything behind. She doesn't even tell her best friend where she's going or why she's going, anything. She basically leaves without a trace. And in New York, she's trying to cope with the tragedy. She's trying to make sense of her life. She's trying to get back to it, I guess. And it's a very short book. This is the shortest book of the month, and about loss and grief and tragedy and the importance of friendship, and that you're not alone and you don't have to go through stuff like that alone. And yeah, it's a really beautiful book, and I love the cover. The next book I'm gonna talk about is a 5-star read for me. I loved this book. I talked about it in one of my reading vlogs, and that is The Art of Starving by Sam J. Miller. And this is, I'm gonna put a huge trigger warning for this book for eating disorders, calorie counting, self-harm, all of that stuff. It gets pretty like detailed and deep in this book, but this is about a guy named Matt, and Matt is struggling with a severe eating disorder. He feels that the less he eats, the more power he feels, the more in control he feels, and I think that this was beautifully made, and I think the author did such a good job at portraying the life of someone with an eating disorder, because it shouldn't be glamorized. But here we get to follow him as like his thoughts and his process dealing with an eating disorder, and it's just really well made. And I've read a lot of books about eating disorders because I'm very interested in the subject, and the fact that he feels in control and powerful is so very true. Like, people don't choose to get an eating disorder, and if it was easy to stop, then people would stop. But it's not easy. It's a real disease, and with that comes real problems and issues, and I think it was very well made. But a huge trigger warning, and just be aware of that before you read it. It's very, very into like depths of eating disorders and calorie counting and self-harm and stuff. But I really enjoyed it. I think it was really well portrayed of this author, and this is the best book I've ever read about eating disorders, hands down. 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I'm going to talk about is Truly Devious, which is a mystery series, and this is the first book. This is a book about Stevie, this girl who is a genius basically. She wants to study crime, and there is this boarding school, Ellingham Academy I think it's called, and it's for geniuses. And she goes to this boarding school, and in this boarding school there's been a murder and kidnapping in the past, and you follow 2 timelines here. So one in the past where that happened, and one in the present where she goes to the school. She wants to solve this crime, and bad things starts to happen in the present too, and she's trying to solve that too. And it's just a very, very good mystery book, and especially if you haven't read any mystery or too much mystery like me, this is a great way to start, because I think it's a very light mystery. I don't think it was very harsh or not that scary and stuff. So this is the perfect mystery if you want to get started like me. And I really enjoyed this. And the author is Maureen Johnson. I think I forgot to mention that, but definitely a good start to the series. I loved this book. I believe I gave it 4 stars, and definitely a series that I wanted to continue. The next book I'm going to talk about is Challenge Your Deep by Neil Schusterman. So when I started this, I was very confused. So I had to look up on Goodreads to just like see what people were saying, because I was very confused because the description doesn't give you a lot. But this is basically, we follow a kid who lives with schizophrenia. So we get to follow his mind. We get to read what's going on inside of his mind, his thoughts, as he's struggling with schizophrenia. And schizophrenia is such a difficult disease to imagine, so that's why it's so confusing, and it's supposed to be confusing, that's the thing. And I think he did a very good job at portraying it, and it even has like sketches and like drawings inside of it, and it's just really good. And if you're interested in schizophrenia or any sort of psychosis, I would definitely recommend this. It's so interesting to get to follow him as how he sees the world, you know, because they see the world differently and they see things that we don't see, and it's very, very interesting. So a powerful book and an interesting book. Next book is The Vanishing Stare by Maureen Johnson, which is the sequel to Truly Devious, and this is basically just a continuation on Truly Devious, and I can't go in too much on this because it's obviously the second book in a series, and if you haven't read the first one, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but this is the straight continuation after the first book. So we follow Stevie and her friends at Ellingham Academy, where there's been a murder and a kidnapping, and they're trying to solve it, and bad things happen, and it's very, very good. I can't wait to read the third book. I've ordered it, and it should come in this week, and I'm very excited about it. And it's gonna be a 4th book, so look forward to that. But yeah, I definitely recommend this series if you're into mystery. Super cool, and the boarding school vibe, which I personally love, is just amazing, so definitely recommend this. The next book I'm going to talk about is the longest book that I've read this month, 501 pages I believe, and that is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is a YA fantasy that I really enjoyed. It's about this girl, Bree, who recently lost her mother in a car accident, or at least that's what everyone thinks, including Bree. And she moves away or to this school where you live on campus with her best friend, and they live together, and you know, they're gonna have a good time. But pretty early on, Bree discovers a secret society and she gets involved and welcomed into this world of magic and demons, and she discovers a lot about herself and her mother that actually went to this school when she was younger. And yeah, she gets to introduce this whole new world, and the magic system and the magic world is like about King Arthur and stuff, and I'm not really familiar with that, so I had to learn it all fresh and new. But if you are interested in King Arthur and you know a lot about it, then a lot of it will be not new for you. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really, really good fantasy, and I read it pretty quickly, even for being such a big book. I would love if there would be more books in this series. I'm not sure if it's a standalone or a series, but at least there isn't any books out there yet. So, but I definitely recommend this. I thought it was really good, and we do get a little bit of romance in here, which I personally love in fantasy books. I don't really read romance books, but a little bit of romance in fantasy is just perfect. The next book I'm going to talk about is called King and the Dragonflies by Kagan Calendar, and this is about a guy named, or he calls himself King, and he recently lost his older brother. Very suddenly, very unexpectedly. I mean, he was very young, but he died, and King believes that he has turned into a dragonfly, and that he's always there, and he visits him in his dreams, and yeah, he thinks he's a dragonfly and that they talk to each other and stuff. And it's a very beautiful and heartbreaking story about losing someone very close to you, but also finding back to a friendship that you've lost and that means a lot to you. And it's a pretty short book, but I thought it was very beautiful and well done and important because he realizes stuff about himself and his brother, and yeah, it's just a very beautiful story about loss and grief and finding yourself. Yeah, I definitely recommend this. The last book that I read this month is probably the favorite of the month. It's this and Legendborn, and this is one of my favorite books of all times now. I adored it. I loved it. And that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is about a woman named Nora who feels like she's done with life. She feels like she hasn't any place in the world anymore. She feels like she have let down everyone, including herself. She doesn't feel like she belongs here anymore. And she decides to attempt to take her life. And she ends up in a library that's called the Midnight Library, where she meets her old librarian that she had in school. And they have like a very good relationship. They were very close. So she meets her there. And there she gets introduced to this world of books. And every one of the books has a different life that she could have lived or can try to live. And there's a book of regrets with all of the regrets she's ever felt in her life. And she basically gets a second chance to make things right or to undo the regrets in her life. And she basically jumps into this life and gets to try things, gets to try like what happened if I never did that. And what happened if I did that instead of that. And she gets to try out all of these cool lives. And it's a very interesting concept. And Nora discovers that everything is not always what it seems, and the perfect life doesn't exist. It's just a very beautiful story about discovering that life isn't perfect. But I can't really pinpoint the genre of this. I wrote sci-fi/fantasy, but I'm not really sure. But I loved this book. Such a cool concept and an important life lesson as well. Very interesting one. Yeah, this was just such a cool concept for me, and I definitely want to check out more of his books, and I would definitely recommend this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. One of my new favorite books. That was all for my wrap up. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. And if you have read any of these, please let me know what you think down below. And yeah, goodbye.